Cameron, can you hear us?
I can hear you, yes, but I can't, I can see you, but I can't turn it on from my end, so you can't see me.
All right.
But it says I can't turn it on because you've stopped it at your end. Whether you meant to or not.
I'm just turning on the camera. Oh, okay. It should be on there now, Cameron.
I'll try again. Oh, thank goodness. I felt so invisible.
There she is. Hi, Cameron.
Hi, everybody.
What do you think? Are we ready to go, Cameron, from your end?
Appears so.
Okay. Tyler?
Yeah, let me just get the form.
Excellent. Well,
There we go.
there we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the March St. Patrick's Day meeting of the Bend Metropolitan Planning Organization. I will call us to order. And how about if we go around this table for introductions? Would you please start?
Yeah, Bob Government or and Deschutes County Commissioner. Reading this, Bend City Council.
Thank you. I am Barb Campbell. I'm a Bend City Councilor, and I am also chair of the Bend MPO. We have Tyler Dickey, who is our staff on the MPO, and Andrea Napoli. We have a lot of guests today because we have such an exciting meeting. And so I think I will let guests introduce themselves when they speak, if that's all right. And we won't do those introductions right now. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Great. So that will move us along to agenda item 2, which Tyler is going to take us through because we have lost Hobie. Tyler and Andrea are doing the heavy lifting of their own jobs and covering for Hobie at this moment. So we appreciate them. Tyler, take it away.
Well, hopefully everybody online is aware, knows how to do this. There's a raised hand function. If you need to want to speak during the meeting. We also have at the bottom of your screen, there should be a CC button so you can see a live transcript if that's needed. And the meeting is being recorded and will be posted afterwards on YouTube. That's all I have, Counselor.
Great, thank you. That takes us to agenda item number 3, which is public comment. Is there anyone that would like to make a comment to the board of the MPO?
Not public comment, but we do have one attendee online, Toby Marks.
Great. Hi, Toby. Hi, Barb. All right. Seeing no one who would like to speak at this moment, we'll move on to item number 4, which is the meeting minutes from our February 23rd, 2023 meeting. I would happily entertain a motion to approve those minutes. Thank you. We've got a motion from Mr. Mendez and a second from Commissioner Chang. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. That's unanimous. Thank you. That gets us to agenda item number 5. I am just so excited about this, everyone. We have the opportunity to spend some money, and I really think help people with these funds and actually move projects forward. This is why we've got so many guests, is people with excellent ideas for how to spend our COVID relief funding. So I believe that Tyler is going to give us some background on this.
Yeah, I won't spend too much time on this, but just for background, there's been different the federal COVID funding has come from a number of different sources, in the past. Ours are not ARPA funds. Ours came through the Consolidated Appropriations Act for 2021. We learned back in March of 2021, so 2 years ago now, that we were going to get about $1.5 million of funds through that program. Later that spring, ODOT was able to work with the Federal Highway Administration and essentially exchange those federal funds for state funds for us. And so, and actually give us the money, which is not normal for us. Usually we do not directly receive federal funding. ODOT usually maintains those funds for us, and then we work with whoever our recipients are, then work directly with ODOT to get those funds. We actually have these funds in-house. And then since the summer of 2021, we have had a number of meetings with the board talking about different options for spending those funds. And the initial idea was to put them towards bike ped improvements associated with the US 97 North Corridor project at the north end of town. The city of Bend did a study looking at a bike ped crossing of the new alignment, and that turned out to be significantly more expensive than anybody had anticipated. And so the board sent us back to start looking at other options. We've also had some board turnover at that time as well. So we've had a number of new ideas have been presented to us over the last year and a half. And so we've spent time just discussing different projects, and the final direction we got a few months ago, or last fall, was to look at affordable housing project opportunities, some CET improvements, and then the city of Bend. There were kind of a range of project ideas were raised for them. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to our Housing Works and Core Community Land Development.
Okay. Can I ask a clarifying question first? So very familiar with the ARPA funds and kind of the intention behind those dollars, but these federal dollars that came in 2021 as COVID relief funds, was there no kind of intention specified around these funds, what their purpose was?
It was just for transportation relief. I mean, and that being very no distinct or no defined, meaning behind that or clarity. And so it's just given us the flexibility to use them, pretty broadly.
So it wasn't like we're afraid a recession is going to happen, so here's some dollars for stimulus, or ARPA funds are in large part of recovery. And these did not come from direction.
No. They're supposed to be utilized for transportation improvements, whatever that may be. I think some cities have used them, or some areas have used them for tree preservation, to backfill, if they lost funding during that recessionary period, or other things like that. But it's pretty broad in terms of what we can utilize them for.
Thank you.
That's an excellent question. I was hoping we would discuss, exactly that, what is the intent of the funding? Are we honoring that with our allocation? So excellent question. Well, thank you.
There's no federal intent, then we get to
It sounds like
frame that ourselves.
even more broad than we are, which we're also so flexible, but you're absolutely right. I've been thinking about this like the ARPA, where it's relief from COVID. It sounds like this doesn't even have that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
great question.
Yeah. I really think that of the ARPA funds, as they put out response to COVID
Exactly.
and recovery.
Right. Yeah.
But if this is even more broad than that, then we don't even have to frame it that way.
Thanks so much. Great. All right. So Housing Works and Core, is that where we're starting?
Yeah, Chief Webb, real estate director.
Dr. Bianchi, Director of Core Community Land Trust.
Superman executive director.
So, we talked to Tyler for a while about this. We have an opportunity to transform Simpson Avenue. It already is starting to transform because you have the new college development on one side, and then you have proposed 99 units of affordable ownership and rental housing on the other. And you have Simpson Ave in the middle. And what we bring to you is an opportunity to invest in transportation that will make the streets safer, with this influx of a number of new residents and students going back and forth on Simpson. You want anything else?
No, I mean, we'll chime in.
Okay, yeah. So what we're proposing is this new pilot that we plan to bring all over Central Oregon, but we're gonna do it first here in Bend with your support. We're bringing a silver bullet approach of both ownership and rental to the same site so that households who would naturally be displaced by having to leave their subsidized rental and find apartment or an ownership home can stay in their community, can stay a resident of the city of Bend through affordable ownership. And so what we have is CORE is bringing 40 units of affordable ownership, single family, 2 and 3 bedrooms, and Housing Works is bringing the rest of the units, the 56,
59 units.
59 units.
2 big buildings. Rental.
Exactly. All of our the entire community serve less than 8% area median income. And for rental, it's less than 60%. So what we're doing too is we're giving priority to Housing Works clients and core homes. We're giving priority to first generation home buyers, so households who typically have not owned a home nor have their parents, and so their cycle of intergenerational poverty is more significant to their family. And then most importantly, we're giving preference to local workforce. We want those who have made Bend what it is, our essential workers, nurses, pharmacy techs, teachers, to be able to stay here in our community. And so we're really proud of this project because it's this idealistic view of what affordable housing can be and should be. That being said, as many of you in this room know, the Simpson site is difficult. It's one of the last large sites in Bend to do this type of pilot. And at the same time, the infrastructure and the needs are significant. It's on a pit, a mine. So essentially there are significant remediation improvements that need to be made. And right now, the current infrastructure for streets and sidewalks needs to be improved. So what we come to you is specifically for just transportation costs, curb, sidewalks, trail improvements, and street trees, not just to create Simpson Ave in terms of sidewalks, but to create this interconnected community where we have trails, walking paths, and bike paths that go all over the sites that then feed people up and down off of the improved sidewalk systems on Simpson so that folks have that walkability that no affordable housing agency has ever been able to bring to Bend before to the resources on Century.
Yeah, I guess I'll take over a little bit here. So I don't know if any of you have walked Simpson recently or ever. Probably not, because there's really no reason to walk that street. It's really more of a bike freeway if you see many bicycle on it at all either, as opposed to what we would try to build. It would be more of a bike parkway, right? So instead of having, a narrow, straight bike lane where people just, try to get down as quick as possible, we would move the multi-use path into the site, meander through the topography and the trees, connected up to Mount Washington and then down to Century, creating a somewhat slower environment, an environment that's hopefully a lot more enjoyable to access, and sort of go away from that freeway mentality that we often have in the city of Bend on some of our arterials and major collectors. So that's, of course, it's not cheap to do that. We're in the design phase now. We're actually doing a lot more specific engineering design for this earlier than we normally would, just because one, there's maybe funding available, and so we want to know what it's going to cost us specifically, but also to convince the city that it's a better alternative than a car, a bike car and get 10 freeway kind of arterials instead of.
And what we're proposing too is a 10-foot wide path instead of the city required 8. So that kind of, talking to our transportation engineer, it's kind of the difference between multi-use where you can get people walking and jogging and biking versus not. And so that we've got the improvement of that front trail system, As Jeff just mentioned, it's a lot smarter than having a super road freeway. Like, that goes down a very functioning street. It's very functioning pathway would really help too. And the university is going to be expanding right across the way too. So we expect a lot of use of that corridor in the future.
And I'll just add that it's not just for the residents that we're serving. There's this local Forest Ridge neighborhood and community that we would integrate. Both of our sites have access points from Forest Ridge. You can bring current residents and neighbors through our community on our bike and walking path down to the improved sidewalk system, so that we are creating transportation options for both the existing residents and the new residents. This, what you're seeing in front of you, is a schematic of what the core side on the western parcel would look like. As you can see, we're preserving a number of the trees that are on the sides, specifically around Simpson Avenue. We went through a resident-driven design process to develop the site plan. We had 80 local residents and neighbors on Forest Ridge participate. And what we heard from them was that the most important piece is the transportation option, but not just putting transportation in, but putting it in safely, right? And improving it so that folks do feel comfortable running with their families along Simpson Avenue.
That's great. Are there any questions? Yeah.
First question is, do we have any idea of what the sidewalk and bike lane, et cetera, is going to look like on the other side of Simpson? Yeah.
We do. So we have a schematic of what OSU.
It's already been, so the portion of it that has the kind of new OSU Cascades kind of crossing, that I believe is already kind of the profile that they're going to be able to improve the street width. That all the way up to that, they've already done. So that's what it's going to look like. I believe it's a 8-foot walkable path, and they're not going to change that profile going to the street. So we're kind of almost matching the other side, making our trail a little bigger to support the multi-use piece of it. But yeah, so that's our understanding in talking to OSU is that their master plan isn't going to have much improvements in their side.
First question, and the second question is, so your fund request, is that pretty much for stuff on Simpson, or does it reach up throughout the? So I think throughout the planned community.
There's really essentially
all the way up to
two spines. There's one that goes east-west that would connect. It wouldn't go all the way to Century because our property stops at 15th, I think. And so it would go from 15th to Mount Washington. And then there's the short bit of 17th Street, which we're requesting the city vacate, would have another similar multi-use path that would actually intersect with.
Yeah, so if you can look closely on that one, Pepper, you can see 17th to the checker there. If you could, yeah, it's right there. Yeah, so there'll be a substantial kind of, it'll be a focal piece of eastern that will go right through there and connect 17th for bicycles and traffic and a bunch of other stuff, right down to Simpson. Now we'll probably jog a little bit to the left because if you drive by, there's like a 6-7 foot grade. A rock that's sitting there, so we'll kind of sweep it down. But our vision's a really nice, well lit kind of path system that goes right through there.
And I think it's 15th that is a neighborhood greenway.
Yeah.
It doesn't connect down to 5th. I think you just said that. It does. Yeah.
Our property doesn't go that far.
Right.
And so we can't build somebody else's property.
Sure,
It'll
yeah.
go down as far as where we can go.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that the portion between 15th and our property ends is owned by the Mobile Home Owners Association.
Yeah.
And, and we'd be willing to talk with them if they wanted to, have it extend all the way down to 15th.
full connection.
We've been working back and forth, getting feedback from Bend MPO, but specifically what you wanted to spend funds on. And so we've sent a revised budget that reflects that. And in terms of, the ask, if you even look at the ask for the cost of residents that just are properties will serve, although we know there'll be a multitude more residents. You know, we're asking for less than $9,000 a household. We think that from a dollar per doors perspective is really powerful.
This ad, so is that, when you said modified some numbers back in Tyler, is that 836 the total transportation dollar, or is there some?
That's the total transportation cost.
And then secondarily, if we weren't to approve it, what are other funding sources you have for this?
These are state sources. It's part of the site, so we would, develop as we grow site plans. So currently, we've applied, we will apply for it within a week and a half. State LIP funds, which are state housing money, along with 4% housing tax credits. Becky's applying for a similar lift program that's for ownership.
Yeah.
And so all of the site work and buildings are funded by those sources.
I would say that unfortunately in the state of Oregon, there's no infrastructure specific funds, right? So when we go to build a project, we really need to balance quality of the actual vertical unit with infrastructure, especially given the cost of what it takes to develop land in Bend, especially the site. And so while we ask for state and city funding, this will allow us to be this will allow us more funding really to invest specifically in the transportation, whereas otherwise we're just balancing it with what's required.
Yeah, I think it sounds really good. The only comment that I have is as a former Parks District Board member and who's looked at a lot of trail use, any opportunity you have to minimize the meandering for people walking and biking when they're not recreating, it's really appreciated. I think the only time that people really appreciate meandering trails are in places like dog parks, or when they're actually not really, when they're trying to get steps in instead of trying to get somewhere. And so we see this a lot with the Park District, it's meandering around trees, but if you're just trying to get somewhere, you're more likely to people will just use an unsafe striped bike lane instead of a really windy trail.
To respond to that, I think the standard we're trying to go with is not property type, because there's rock outcroppings and that kind of stuff. Meandering, I think, be where we need to get away from features that are site specific. But no, I don't think we wanted to do this. Definitely, on the runs where we can keep it.
I mean, I've seen it all. So
I would also add that we recently shared our plan design with commute options, and they agreed that our proposed meandering rather than property type line was the best option for transportation, given the trees, the outcroppings of rock, and the cost to make it property type. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And my question was kind of related. The city of Bend will require that bike lane on the street in addition, right?
It's there now. It's there.
It's there now. It will continue there. So,
they have
yeah,
features.
I completely understand that's not the safest option, but people will have both options of either cruising down the streets or meandering a little. Is that right?
Yeah.
Great. Excellent. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much. And are you able to stay with us in case there are any other?
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Then we are moving. Is this a second core project? No, that's the same. Now we're on to CPT.
I'll turn over to Eric Lane.
Great.
Yeah. Good morning. Commissioner Chang. And I think we might have covered some of this previously, but so I'll go through a little bit quickly. But my name's Eric Lynn. I'm Strategy and Program Manager with Cascades East Transit, and we're working on a bus stop improvement program. I'm actually working with our vendor this week to acquire new shelters for Hawkwood Station, which we're rebuilding the exterior of the premises there. So as part of our project, we're already getting we're also looking at the rest of Bend and how we can improve amenities at
all bus stops, not just the new building up that you might have heard about that are going to be on the future, which is to bring the fire number up to a higher standard and make it attractive for riders. So, a little bit of background, the shelters that you see out there currently, a lot of them are either old, inherited from other agencies, and they have significant issues. Lots of them are missing glass panels, vandalized in different ways, but they are still vital bus stops, and help with meet the ADA standard. Provides rest and it's an attractive amenity. So out of nearly 40 bus stops that are currently on the street, half of them have significant damage. That's one part of why we're going with upgrades and not just. We want to have something that will be resilient to damage going forward and be a more permanent fixture. So of course, the benefit improves rider experience. Riders have shown demand. This picture here was on the front page of the bulletin last year. Kind of pointed a new phrase, desire paths, demand chairs. People showed their demand where they want to have chairs and want to have that rest. And of course, these are all shovel-ready projects. We have the stops, we have the right of way. We can get out there and go whenever we get the equipment. So we have a few options. Modern shelters are modular, they're resilient to damage. The ones pictured here are the ones that we're using with Hawthorne, the top. That's a 16-foot shelter. They come in 4-foot panels. So we can go down to 8 feet wide. This one's 16. We can do 12 feet, whatever's appropriate to the site. They can be upgraded in a phased fashion. That's our plan, is to add real-time signage down the range. We're looking at adding conduit to new bus stops, but for old ones, we might need to just have solar power fixtures. These are all pretty easy options for these new style shelters. And I did add a slide too, since last time I gave Tyra's presentation.
Do you want to share?
That's okay. I can just read it off. I have a little bit of data looking at effects on ridership and how this can be useful to our clientele. There's a lot of academic research into bus stops and amenities and the impacts it has on ridership. So I picked out a couple of the bigger ones in there, bigger metro areas. So not apples to apples necessarily, but it's a consistent trend that you see across the literature. Amenities improve ridership. One in King County Metro system, they took a structured approach, added bike hoops, real-time signage, and improved or added bus shelters. Each piece added improved ridership. Bike hoops, 200%. Real-time signage, 199%. New or improved shelters, 81% increase in ridership relative to previously and relative to surrounding areas that weren't treated. Utah Transit Authority did bus stop improvement program and saw 141% increase in ridership at stops that had those improvements, but they also saw a decrease in paratransit usage. So those are your medical rides, the dial ride system, very expensive to operate. And if we can make it more attractive or make it more friendly to use the regular bus system, that makes our system more efficient. They saw 108%.
Level concept. What's that? Holding service level concept. So just looking at the effect of
Relative to other areas that didn't have easy access to improved shelters. Yeah, 108% decrease in usage in those areas. And increase in satisfaction. There was a study that looked at specifically all riders versus encumbered users. Those are folks with wheelchairs or mobility issues, right? Encumbered users specifically, 147% increase in satisfaction at places that receive new stops. So there's a lot of compelling arguments for this, but it's just a nice thing to do too. So these are options. They range from $12,000 to $20,000 each, fully outfitted. That's not including the real-time signage that again, we'll expect to add in a subsequent round. That's part of our plans currently. We've just got the technology to bring that online, so we're looking forward to that. But we want to get fixtures out on the street soon. And the last slide was just a look at some of the more high priority sites. This isn't everything, but just an idea of where we can get these out there right away. The green ones are ready to go, no problems. The red sites, we might have to do some construction. Yellow, there's a question of whether we need to change the configuration. So there is a little bit of work here, but we do have quite a bit that we can just get out there and go.
Thank you. Any questions for Eric?
I had one. And maybe this didn't qualify. Is there a reason that CET didn't make a STIP application for this last round? Or
Yeah, Deschutes County STIP, we actually had a pretty competitive round. Some of our other operators, the CO Breeze and our other operator were asking for money. Sisters is building their mobility hub. So we actually trimmed down a lot of the applications, Deschutes County STIP.
okay, I mean, on the statewide STIP, though, there wasn't a single application. There's 2 applications for Deschutes County, and they related to burns and ground something internally. It wasn't just I mean, okay. Okay. I was just curious because it usually CEP always had multiple applications. This was the first time there wasn't a single one.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So you're looking at, you said 25 new in the next phase at something like 20,000 each. So
We're ballparking $500,000 for this project. That would provide at least 25 new shelters fully installed. The install price will be variable, given what the different site needs, whether it needs to be rehabbed or if we have to pour new concrete entirely. So we're looking at $3,000 to $10,000. $10,000 would be we have to just build it.
how did you decide on 25? Like, why not 45? Why not?
This is just looking at the priority sites based on ridership. The options on the map there, there's some of the more high usage sites. But that's given the current situation. And of course, if we build it, we hope that, improve ridership. But this is just looking at the highest usage sites right now. And we do want to expand beyond just the 25. So we're trying to make it manageable right now. Really.
I might just make a comment. For me, it seems, the goal is increased ridership, I believe, for all of us. And I think of that, the way to achieve that, there are kind of 2 paths. The one is the decreased headways, is more buses more frequently, but we've hit an obstacle there, and that obstacle is drivers. And we just haven't been able to solve that problem with money.
No, that's exactly right. And we're working on that.
Of course.
Andrea's doing a lot of good work there to improve the situation for our drivers. But given that we have a bit of a driver shortage, that gives us room to focus on the infrastructure in the meantime. So that's why.
And that's what I think of as that second path to increase ridership, which is all of these amenities, the shelters, the real-time data on the buses.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's right.
Great.
And we have something over 250 stops throughout our system. Some of them are small bench-only ones. And we have a little handbook that shows where these would be appropriate for different types. So that's why we're starting with 25, and we'll see where we go from there.
Is there any kind of, this is beautiful. I really look forward to seeing these in our city. I just think, as one word that has come up in this discussion before is just dignity, the dignity for people waiting for the bus. Are they waiting on a lawn chair that they themselves dragged out? Or is there a nice shelter? Is there any even step down from this opportunity where in some of those that aren't as busy or just a bench or something like that? Is that, and works?
We are going to be improving more stops than just the big ones. We want everything to be comfortable. If you've seen like down 27th, is where we saw a lot of those benches, cinder blocks and more. We want that to be comfortable and usable. And we don't have to wait till Stevens Ranch is built out, for example.
Sure.
Right? People are using it now.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Any other questions? And are you able to stay with us for a while?
Yes.
Longer? Yeah, great. Phil?
You mentioned the varying heights. It gets when it doesn't precipitate out, but when it does, it comes down and it gets very windy. So like just curious about the heights of those shelters I would think that lower ones would be more functional for a place with a lot of wind and intense precipitation, but that's
a good question, actually. The option that I showed off here is what we're planning for most sites. But we do have other options that will be available if we decide that this is an extremely exposed location. We might go with a different model that has a front panel or doesn't face the street to factor in those considerations. So that is an option. And additionally, if like say the old mill districts wants to buy their own that's consistent with their branding, we can provide them with options as well. But for this project, we're looking at these kind of modular style, but we do have other options as well.
And are you working with someone who knows those better? I was just thinking about the flooring thing so that you're protected at least from the wind. You've got someone working with you to tell you that in this location, the wind always comes from, usually comes from this direction.
I'm looking at that. Right?
Yeah, great. Okay. Great. Thank you, Eric. Very nice. All right, that brings us to the city of Bend. And I think David Abbas is who is going to talk to us about those projects.
And Tyler, can you bring Robin in? I'm not able to.
Yeah, it's tomorrow.
Yeah, David Abbas, Director of the Transportation Authority Department, and thanks for opportunity here. Like Barb said in the beginning, it's exciting when there's funds to do things, and we all know there's many things that we can throw funds at. So, but here's the fun part, right? Prioritizing things. Robin, I'll go ahead and kick off. I think she was an attendee. I'm going to be there with a panelist. We can just
She should be in now.
talk through each of these. There's a little PowerPoint I could pull up, Tyler, if we need a map to talk about them. I think everybody knows where most of this is at. On the Drake Park. Hi, Robin.
Hi.
Do you want to kick off and talk about these, Robin, since we got you on now as a panelist?
Yeah, I can share my screen and we can tag team it.
Sure, go for it.
So let me share. Okay, can you guys see that?
Not yet.
Just give it a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds maybe. Did it pop in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we see it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for having us today. Here's the city's COVID request funds. There's one on there on your agenda that we went out and walked this past week, and I don't think it's going to be an easy enough one to accomplish. It needs quite a bit of right of way and the terrain is just really steep. And that's the Greenwood Avenue sidewalk to serve the lower income housing just east of the city's existing UTB. So our first project then is just creating that concept development and initial design for Drake Park Footbridge. This is a really popular route. It's on the city's low stress network and it has a lot of users. We've counted it on 4th of July. It has over 2,000 users. On Thursdays when they have lunch and music and then the movies, there's over 1,000 users. But typically on a typical day, there's anywhere between 400 and 500 users. It's not an accessible smoothness. It's a very rough kind of wood surface. The railings can catch bike handlebars. It's narrow for that many people. And sometimes even people are standing in the middle, taking photos, things like that. So it's a really iconic bridge, but the current design is not functioning very well. So this 150,000 would enable us to do a little bit of exploration on the foundations and develop concepts with the community as far as what does it look and feel like? How did the tie-ins work within the two parks on either side?
Is the current bridge city owned?
It is. It's one of those
Yes.
interesting bridges. It's city owned as well as the Gilchrist footbridge. So those two are city owned and similar to Gilchrist, it's really integrated within the parks network. And if we can get these up to code and quality, I think ODOT, the Parks District would entertain a transfer. Here you can see it's really in the heart of the city. And it does serve a popular transportation route. It serves schools. There's a couple of magnet schools that it serves as well as just general downtown transportation.
Robin, I'll tag team with you and jump in. Our recent TSP transportation system plan also recognized it as a importance and deficiency as part of our system that was identified in the short-term project list. M as in Mike 10, and it's a critical part of our low stress system network. Connects to neighborhood greenways, obviously downtown, and connecting that east to west kind of connection, which is becoming more and more important. You touched on something, but it also connects it's a commuter route to downtown as a whole, but connecting to jobs, services such as City Hall, the county courthouse, the library, Boys and Girls Club, all those things. It's about a 7.5 foot wide bridge today. So Robin was kind of talking about the not complying with PROAG, the public rights and way accessibility guidelines. So there's some accessibility elements here could use some attention.
Yeah.
And $150,000 is 30% design.
That would get us up to a 30% design and the concepts so that we could get the cost estimates for the future completing out design as well as what it would cost us to construct.
Ideally more than 30%, but there's some entitlement and easement and there's some stuff to work through there to come up with a concept that it's a long bridge, fairly long, compared to Gilchrist. So it's not a small little
It's not one we can just plug and play, get one of those you bring in with a crane. Yeah, no.
And then there's water going underneath it.
It's on all piers and it's just purely lengthy. So
Yeah.
Try to protect the water and the fish. I'm sure there are requirements for that.
Well, there's planning through the park too. If you widen the bridge significantly, do you need to widen the path through the park? So I'm assuming that will all be considered as part of this as well.
Yeah.
It wants to shrink the width of the river by, taking out your. That actually might. That might actually significantly shrink the.
Is there an order of magnitude estimate of like what the cost to actually do the improvement? You know, we're talking like, we're talking 5 million?
And not at this time, Ariel, that I'm aware of, most probably you've done some more research, but you know, is look at the structure, can, you know, the piers and things be utilized and widened and redecked, or is this a new type structure, type construction altogether that would all factor into that? You know,
Yeah, it really opens the, you know, kind of like lifts the lid under the car and, you know, tries to figure out even helping us line out the permitting that we need from Army Corps of Engineers and other entities. So it's a little bit expensive for 30%, but I think there's a lot going on here with the investigation that we need to do on the piers.
So a couple $100 for a gigantic bow to give it to the Parks District is not, you know, ignores, you know, if we wrapped it up really nice.
Not quite yet.
Yeah.
all right,
Okay,
Alana, next-
thank you. Next.
Next, okay. The next one is also design request. This is $126,000 to design 2 blocks of shared use path adjacent to Cooley Road near the railroad. This is tagging on to a project that the ODOT is doing at the north end. The North Corridor project gets us shared use paths between 3rd Street, and they're taking it all the way to the railroad just east of 3rd Street. And so it would tie into dirt. And so we're trying to get that to tie into a couple of existing sidewalks that are out there. This is a really big one for our low stress network, a key route, as well as trying to get employees by bike to the city's new Juniper Ridge campus. So it's an interesting project. There's enough right of way to do it, but we just need to be able to get that designed and tie into the ODOT facility.
There is an old canal crossing, irrigation canal crossing in there. And there's a, you know, pretty distinct barrier, east-west barrier of the railroad. The ODOT North Corridor project is building connectivity up there, like Robin mentioned, but there's the railroad. Essentially from Empire all the way to Cooley, there's no pedestrian crossing.
Over that railroad.
And on Cooley today, it is developed out to arterial standard, east of like High Standard Drive. There's bike lanes, there's sidewalks, you know, all the way towards the Cooley 18th roundabout, out there by the West Lodge headquarters. The ODOT North Corridor project is improving railroad crossing and making it a quiet zone crossing as well. So this is really an infill of a block and a half or 2 to get that connectivity in there for this area and tie into the mall area, you know, services and jobs, and get the school even farther west on Cooley High Standard.
Yeah.
And then from,
North of Cooley Road?
Now, this is
This is on Cooley Road?
east of the highway and the railroad.
That little kind of light blue line.
It's the white blue line.
Yeah, it's a box.
Oh, I see.
And the dotted line is the railroad.
The dotted line is the highway, the new highway alignment. And so, you know, the mall is kind of in this southwest quadrant over here. So this is really just this little piece of missing sidewalk, missing shared use path to tie into existing sidewalks, and then, you know, designing the crosswalk so we can connect to low stress network routes.
And it's more than just the pathway. It's getting that 1.5, 2 blocks up to arterial standards. It's curve, bike lane, sidewalks, or multi-use path.
does this help connect folks up to the manufactured home parks that are north of there?
It's farther to the north along.
That's a
90.
little bit, yeah, that's actually along US 97.
Okay.
that ODOT is seeking a congressional earmark for. We really support that. There's going to be a lot of connectivity in this area though, Barb, because that really would enhance the ability to get around walking and biking. This also complements CET's new Route 8, which they're planning to do, which is a clockwise route that's going to connect Cooley and Butler and the mall. And so it'll be this large loop. So it's definitely needed to have a complete street aspect right there.
Thank you. Any other questions on that one?
Yeah, I mean, what's your avenue for construction funds?
There's a lot of, well, be part of the transportation construction fund, if we could, and that would be in like the next biennium down the road. Where your discussion of the transportation so the construction need to be solved or grant type applications if we can, but this would get us to a good kind of a hard number to go after and budget for.
Great. Milwaukee,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I think she's got one more.
go ahead, Brooke.
Barb, we took Milwaukee off. The asphalt prices are quite expensive right now, and that's going to exceed the ability of this program. So this next one is, we can, piece it apart, I guess. But it's allowing the Public Works Department to purchase equipment to enable us to maintain walking and biking facilities. As the city is moving to more protected and separated bike facilities, the need to move to smaller equipment to get up there and maintain it is definitely necessary. So this is requesting 3 pieces of equipment. The first one is $200,000 for a 1.5 yard sweeper for bike ped facilities. It's going to supplement our 2023-24 budget. That would enable us to go in and keep the bike lanes clear of debris, particularly spring cleanup when there's cinders in those trapped bike lanes, and fall pine needles and pine cones, things like that. Allows us to comply with our DEQ stormwater management program. The next one is $30,000 just for a new snowplow blade for us to test out. Right now, the city runs all our plow blades on shoes, which elevate the plow head above the pavement. That enables us not to catch and have the plow trip on a raised element like a storm hole, a manhole lid, or a storm grate. But what that does is that leaves snow material on the road, which through a freeze-thaw cycle turns to slush and ice and freezes overnight, and then requires additional work on the city's end to do mag chloride, spread traction material, and then clean up the traction material. And so what this blade is it's one of those articulating blades. And so it has 3 segments across the front of it. And so each blade has a small trip on it. But if you hit a manhole or a storm grate, just that segment of the plow blade would kick up, and the rest of the machine, would enable just what we call bare pavement, so that the more material is removed. It keeps basic bike lanes cleaner, and enables us to ride a little bit more on those nice sunny winter days. So it's just one plow blade we'd be using an existing plow that the city already owns. The final one is $90,000. This is just for implements to put on existing equipment. So it's an additional sweeper broom, snow blower for the roundabouts and show-use paths, and an additional blade for winter ops for bike ped facilities for the small equipment. So that would be on what's called a toolcat, which is a really small piece of equipment that we can climb up onto the shared use paths and keep clean.
Or in the protected paths such as
Mhm.
seen on Wilson, or the protected roundabout at 9th and Wilson. So the first and last option here, items here are small equipment, because our snow plows and sweepers today fit in those protected facilities.
What's what's it look like to operate that? Like, is there a plan for, is it, I don't. are we
Take
gonna
staff
run into the same-
operate them.
We're gonna run into the same problem as CET without
Yeah.
difficulty finding drivers, or?
Yeah, I mean, so on these small pieces initially, through the pandemic, seasonal help was a challenge. But we've always had seasonal help in the summer construction season. Pretty tough to get this last couple, 2 or 3 years. The other thing we started 2 years ago was 4 seasonal staff in winter for bike ped focus, right? Instead of pulling a CDL driver out of a plow to go shovel out an ADA ramp in the roundabout, we started budgeting for some seasonal help to do that. Day one of a snowstorm, the bridge crossings, the ADA, the roundabout, some of those kind of no man's lands, I call them, because there's not that direct adjacent property on it, perhaps. So then we had seasonal help budgeted year round. So we took the seasonal budget and repurposed it to 4 public works labor positions, really entry level, could be right out of high school, don't need your CDL, start your public works career. And those 4 staff members is kind of that multimodal bike ped crew day one of a storm until they get through them. So the little toolcat, or this little sweeper that's not a CDL requirement to run would be that crew at this point. But as we expand, yeah, the equipment doesn't run itself, got to have somebody to run it.
That sounds great. Thanks.
Okay.
That was it up there. Like I said earlier, there's always plenty of options. There's mobility efforts that can be considered. Micromobility, the Ride Bend was a successful program there before COVID. And microtransit program that there's efforts and desires to get that up and going again. There's quick build enhancement crossings through about different arterials and collectors in town. There's the most recent wayfinding contract for kind of the north, south, east, west, key routes. We could add and expand on that. So a wide variety of things. If there's interest by the board, be happy to come back with any finer details on any of those or these as well. Thank you. Thank you, Robin.
Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robin.
Just to go back to, has there been any conversations with Visit Bend about using sustainability fund money for, I'm thinking particularly the Drake Park footbridge, because it's so heavily used by tourists. It seems like it might be a good fit, but I don't know if they would have qualms about funding something like, concept design,
Right.
or if they want to have it really be shovel ready. But have there been any efforts to help with them?
There's always talk about, those tourism funds and how they can be used. And so we can definitely continue that discussion or have a pointed conversation with them specifically about Drake. In the past, we applied for a community pathways grant. Unsuccessful on it, unfortunately. So I was looking for different ideas and ways to help that crossing.
And sustainability fund, if I'm recalling correctly, is really focused on construction implementation. The 1 or 2 cycles that they've done so far. That doesn't mean that they couldn't be
There might be a step.
persuaded
Yeah.
to consider things differently, but I agree. I think that's a very appropriate place to.
With the BIO funding these days, or the IIJA, some of those, it doesn't matter what the funding source. A lot of times, if you've got a shelf-ready project or one that's already been defined and scoped, they tend to fare better, and that's what the idea of that 30% design or wherever, hopefully more than 30%, right? But get that defined concept, good cost estimate, and then when we're going after whatever the funding source is, we've got kind of that defined scope and price we're asking for at that point for construction.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
All right, we have a little less than a half an hour, and we do have one other agenda item. Tyler, we want 15 minutes for that?
Yeah, we can always punt that to the next meeting, and it
Okay.
can't be, we've delayed it once.
Yeah,
As next April is kind of our drop dead, it's one of our capital. That's what I would require. But if we want to spend the rest of the meeting talking about these funds, we can
okay,
do
okay.
I just have one question about.
Of course.
So we've heard a lot of different, ideas presented. There's more, the dollar value that was presented is more than the 1.5
Yes.
million that is available. I think I have a pretty good idea of what would happen to CET if that proposal wasn't fully funded. It's kind of like, it sounds like the closer you can get to that number, the better. There's lots of benefits there. What about for the core? If it's not fully funded, what does that look like? Is that like trails that suddenly end, or is it, what are the options there? Does it really need to be the full amount or nothing, or what does it look like?
So overall, as we fundraise for this project, core project alone is a $20 million project, overall. If we do not get the funding we need, we tend to delay the start rather than delay the quality.
So a big part of the cost is delayed affordable housing.
And I would just say, I would say that, if core gets all of its funding, we can start construction in September of this year, which would mean affordable housing will be closing, in 2025 and 2026, and housing works is right behind us.
What other funding are you waiting for?
The only funding we're waiting on for our site is the state SWIFT funding. Our application is pending, and that award comes out in the summer. We have never not received funding. This would be the final push.
What was the timing again, Tyler, on, we don't have a spend by necessarily.
Andre, which have been allocated by
2026 and like, so we spent like 1.9.
yes, we have a really long period of time. I think
We have needs now.
we have needs now, and we've been sitting on it for a while. We're kind of like, hey, these were COVID era funding. We'd like to, from a staff perspective, and I guess I'm talking with Councilor Campbell, it's like we'd like to get at least some of them moved out into projects sooner rather than later than possible.
Yeah, my only ask, I think, is that certainly sitting on the money is not appropriate, but and to my questions around what else is available to councilors too is very rarely do we have no strings attached money, right? That can be used for maintenance equipment and things like that. It usually always has a tie that, I hate to spend it all right now unless we were really satisfied, just because there may be one of those things that nothing else will qualify for, right? And I don't know exactly what it is, but the city's maintenance equipment is a good example. There's no federal money that usually can pay for maintenance equipment or those type of features. And so I am curious on a couple. I am, all good applications. I'll support, this is one of those ones where Commissioner Chang and Barb have heard me before, right? As the non-elected official, I'm certainly not going to get in the weeds on this, but certainly there are other things. Barb, you mentioned the path to the mobile home sites. We are applying for congressional direct spending, but just as easily we could apply for 200,000 to get the design going, and that's an underserved equity issue there, right? But not necessarily wanting to take these funds because there's other things that we can apply for, but certainly probably fits in just as highest priorities, the Cooley sidewalk and some of these others when you take into consideration the totality up there, the equity component. So that's my only discussion point around, maybe holding a little bit for something else that might come up. And the other thing is, generally being all the dollars for everything, it's tough for us unless we really prioritize something versus, getting the half of something. But those are just my comments.
Thank you.
So are you looking for what kind of decision are you making?
Well, I was thinking maybe next I hate to be negative, but, I was going to ask, are there any of these projects that cause us any angst or whatever? Do we want to start by maybe just taking something off of the list? And I did see another hand. Would you like to comment?
Yes, please.
Please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Jack Farley.
Yours,
I'm
thanks,
a resident of Tomball.
Yes.
And by God, you guys spend money quicker than you. I'm aware that, this money doesn't need to be spent immediately, and I'm just showing up to raise my hand for Tomball, just because I'm
Thank you.
just acknowledging that we are now part of that metropolitan area, and we had, I'm in touch with a lot of folks in the community that are very interested in the Tomball community plan, which is currently on hold. But of course, there always need for dollars, and so I was just wondering if it's possible to set aside some money. Just $1 million,
Just $1 million.
just as a gesture of intention to include in the future of Bend.
Thank you.
So we don't have a dollar in mind. I had thought 50,000, but I don't happen to. We don't have any formal plans
Of
for
course.
this. So
Thank you. That's an excellent point. You're absolutely right. The Bend MPO is not just Bend. It includes Fellow and Deschutes River Woods. And, you're right. That might be a reason to hold some funds back. Chris,
Can
of course, sure.
I mean, for context, I would love to have, maybe staff share a little bit of history of how the work of the MPO is a significant part of the reason why we're getting the bike ped underpass, right, just east of just west of the new roundabout right now. And also the significant part of the reason that we're getting a bike ped path that extends all the way from Highway 97 to Tumalo eventually. And at least in this first phase, is going to get to Old Bend Redden Highway. So it's not like, and we saw ongoing discussion.
Some of those been getting love.
Because there's a lot of people in Tumalo who feel like they're basically being neglected and slighted. And Tumalo has been part of thinking and regional transportation planning.
Sure.
And that is producing immediate investments in that, in right now and in the next couple of years. So it's not I wouldn't want to give the impression that it's appropriate to hold aside $1 million for Tumalo right now because they've been getting the shaft.
No, to the commissioner's point, I mean, certainly I think that just the investments we've totaled, in the last few years, we're over 10 million now in transportation investments in Tumalo. So certainly, but if you were someone from the Deschutes River Woods here, you could certainly argue that the MPO hasn't spent $1 down there in the last 4 years. So that's one. And I mean, not that there's a good project. I mean, we've talked about bus stops down there, but unless there's additional drivers, then we're faced with that. But certainly, I think the Deschutes River Woods part of that argument is legitimate.
Well, we'll see what comes out of the bigger interchange discussions.
Excellent. So I thought maybe, I'm so sorry, Chris Jody, you've had your hand up.
Oh, thank you, Counselor. Just wanted to point out, in building on the comments of both Commissioner Chang and Bob, the county did have a similar funding allocation for expenditure through COVID relief funding filtered through the state. And I believe it's the same category of funds that the MPO board's discussing right now. Our board took that entirety of the 1.2 million and invested it right there in Tumalo for the ped undercrossing and the path connecting over to Bailey Road. So just wanted to point that out. The county's full allocation did go right smack dab to community of Tumalo.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd try.
No harm. Squeaky wheel.
It's 99 units, so it's 2.4 people in the county. We're looking at over 200 people living in this unit. I mean, in this project alone, which is over half the population of Cumberland too.
No, do more than, we're having majority of 3 bedrooms. So that's house at least 4 people.
Okay.
So yes.
So pretty close actually to the, I mean, there's a lot of people. My instinct was just to look at, I mean, the ones that I feel like are slammed up, I really like the systemic wide project. So I really like the transit stops. I really like the maintenance, capital, equipment that the city is asking for. I have a little bit of qualms about some of the design money that's needed, just because I would like to see, have be reassured that this isn't going to be a concept that is then sits for years and then has to be revisited. And so I feel like I have a little bit of worry about that. I mean, the core project sounds like it's really close to being ready to go, which is pretty exciting. It's a lot of money. I mean, it's a lot of people that would benefit from it. It doesn't quite have the same systemic wide aspect that I like about these other ones. So I kind of feel like that's maybe my third level. And, if we look at like the city's operating capital equipment request for 320, and then a significant number, if not all of the 25 stops for CET, and then the core project, I think that's probably how I would rank them.
And that would take us to 320, 500K roughly, and then some portion of 836.
Yeah, I like this for the discussion around the systemic ones and those two in particular. My only thing on the CT is I really would like to know why applications weren't turned in, because CT's been very successful, right? And unless it didn't meet the criteria for that, but otherwise, and it may not, maybe there is something tied to capital or investments of bus stops. But my only question on and certainly I'm okay with the core getting some funds. It's just that question of, should an MPO fund all the transportation improvements for affordable housing, and that crossing that line for future, not expectations, because certainly this is one-time money, but I think that's just a little too much for me to say we're paying every dollar of their on-site transportation improvements. Certainly half or something might be more than supportive, but for me, just the principle of that, as we're acting as an NPO, it's tough to get my mind around.
I entirely understand that. For me, it is because this is COVID. And, going back to Phil's original question about the intent of the funding and how do we provide relief from what has happened with COVID. And, to me, it's really economic. People were hit by failing economy. They lost their jobs. If they lost their jobs, they might have lost their car or their housing. And to me, that's our connection to that housing, is through the COVID relief part of it, even though I completely understand what you're saying about the mission of this organization is transportation, not necessarily housing.
The balance
right?
would be 100%. I certainly agree. Affordable housing is a good use of our money for transportation, whether it's the 100% of it as we want it. But that I have challenges with.
And then the other is that idea of system-wide, and that particular location for the core project, honestly, would be fairly low on my priority, just as far as folks who need the support. Folks who really depend on public transportation, for example, people who really depend on those sidewalks and bike lanes to get around. It's one of the wealthier parts of our community we're talking about, but there's a university, it is right by that university. And I feel like university communities, wherever they're situated, do have more of that multi-income, they need staff. They're not all tenured professors making a good living. And then the students, maybe there could be students living in some of this new housing. And to me, that then is more serving the entire community or region, really, by doing infrastructure around the university, even though that neighborhood is not, it really is not one I might have chosen for improved infrastructure.
Yeah.
And then I would say Drake Park footbridge, just honestly just bothers me that it's even on the Bend transportation. You know, I know that the answer is look in the mirror, Barb. If anybody's going to do this, it needs to be you. But shouldn't this be the Bill Smith Memorial Bridge? You know, shouldn't this be the community all gets together to pay for this somehow? You know, and again, I know it's on me, but I don't like the idea of our funding going for that one in particular. I have been wondering about Greenwood with the new housing. We're talking about Highway 20 up near, is that right, David?
The one that's.
The one that we considered, yeah, east of town,
Yeah,
with that new big project going over there, and
Yeah.
then having that pathway connection along the highway, which would be working with, you know, on the details of that, but connecting that new housing development over there to the, you know, shopping centers, the Safeway, the Costco, that whole area was an idea. That Robin, staff looked at it. Robin, you mentioned it was a little challenging and didn't feel it was.
Yeah, it's got too many questions right now. You know, it does need right away from the land systems and topographically challenging. So wouldn't know quite what we were getting into for design and so how much to price it at was a difficulty for staff at this level.
okay.
Maybe some right away or needs to work out there, so it just didn't feel like it was close enough or far enough for them.
And then that one, I might also think about the citywide, you know, is this system-wide, you know, how much of the community is served by a project like that? I'm afraid it's fairly limited as far as who the number of folks who would benefit, the area of town would benefit, even though, yeah, absolutely, this was a concern of the Bend City Council when this project came up, was connecting those folks to the community. And then how about that Cooley Road? I have those same kind of considerations as far as system wide, but then on the other hand, I really like finishing the corridor. I really hate, you know, to me, it's almost just stranded asset, all of the money that has been spent east of there. And then you come to the railroad tracks, you know, seems, you know, I like the idea of, you know, finally finishing that section, even though that's another one. Does it serve the entire, you know, how much of the community does it serve? But it certainly kind of finishes something up. And then on equipment, oh my gosh, yes, please. I've been waiting for these little things for years and years for sidewalks and bike lanes. And the better we do with those protected bike lanes, the harder it is to maintain them, especially in the winter. So I'm very interested in that. Those are my thoughts. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to interject a couple of things.
Mhm.
I mean, if you're thinking about, you know, shrinking some of the requests, like CET, there's, of the shelters are identified on the map, there's 14 sites that are ready today. I mean, where you can just go out and install them.
Okay.
The other 9 that were on there, or 10, I think there may be issues, you know, so they don't know. And so there's kind of that option to think of it that way in terms of, hey, we have 15, whatever, site ready places that we could build. And then the other thing I was going to say about the Drake Park Bridge is the city has applied at least once or twice for these same like design funding like this. And it's never been, it's not competitive given the criteria that are used in some of the state funding pots to get that design work done. But I think there's some thought that if you could get if the city, or if we could figure out some way to get that design done, and you have that shelf ready document, then it becomes more competitive for grant funding because you've got something, you know, in hand that you can present as part of that process. So I'm not making a pitch for it. I'm just like,
Thank you.
that's why it's one of the things. It's not been competitive in the past for grant funding just to do step through planning and design process.
This was essentially make this project shovel ready, you know, that shovel ready idea. That once you've got it to shovel ready, then maybe you can get funding to actually do the thing.
Yeah, I mean, the only issue now on bike facilities and grants is there's such a strong equity component. And as we look to apply across the region, the reality is most places in Central Oregon, unless they're serving a mobile home park, unless, you know, they're just never going to score to even make the initial criteria. Like our applications this time were in Chiloquin, you know, and these segments between Bend and Redmond serving. And so that it's just I mean, rightfully so, don't get me wrong, but that's the new threshold and shelf ready bike ped projects for our community paths program and some of the other ones.
Thank you. And then, yeah, as far as those bus shelters, you know, I was thinking of that one as much money as we can give them, that's how many shelters that will be built. And, you know, that one really isn't an all or nothing kind of thing versus I just can't start building affordable housing until they've come up with all of them. And again, I'm not arguing for all, I'm just, you know, pointing that out. So we have burned up some time here. We will go ahead and move that last agenda item to our next meeting. Maybe we'll put it as the first thing in our next meeting to make sure we get it done. So right now, is there anything we want to say we're just not interested in that of these presentations we heard?
I didn't have a chance to give my.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Phil, please. Yes,
and-
you've got 5 whole minutes, Phil, take it all.
There are a lot of principles laid out around the table, systemic, and you know, what's incremental, and you know, the value of having shovel ready design. Right, a lot of that, and I agree with all of it. I would maybe, I would only pick one project, which would be the Drake Park Bridge, and I use that bridge regularly. Walk my bike across it, or whatever. It is, you know, everything else we're talking about here is infrastructure or equipment that we don't have. And that is something that we have that it's not what I'd like it to be, but, you know, we've got a bridge, it works to some degree, and I'd be much more interested in prioritizing stuff that we don't have, you know, anything, you know, we don't have any infrastructure in place yet.
I mean, I would just say that for people using mobility devices, it's probably not really accessible. I mean, it's so bumpy. And so I feel like that's an equity component to that particular project. But nevertheless, I agree. I think there's probably other avenues that we might still explore for that, you know, whether visit Bend or looking at the city.
You got Galveston City. I mean, it's just a couple blocks either way. So pick on that a little bit. I was gonna say about the bus stops that that's a kind of incremental, you know, an incremental thing as well. And you know, the idea of, you know, we hitting 2015 right now, and you know, and then there's future cycles of STIP for them to see when there's, you know, the remainder are getting ready. I think that's a reasonable, that might be a reasonable approach to that. And I would agree on Simpson that really what we're talking about, if we're talking about kind of a, you know, marginal or disadvantaged populations angle, is we're talking about the students that could potentially, I mean, I know that LSU Cascades has been built out from South End going north, but there could come a time where, you know, the main way that people use to get into campus is from the north end. And if you set up a really nice, you know, north entrance, you know, corridor, you're facilitating that future, rather than people going 4 more blocks or whatever on nasty, narrow little bike lane on a Century Drive, which is not. So, you know, that, you know, so it's the students and it's the, you know, it's the 100 units of affordable housing. So I would also support, and I'm not necessarily plugging for full funding, but I would support a meaningful partial funding of that project.
So it sounds like there's really strong support for the 320,000 request from the city. Some significant funding, maybe the 15 bus shelters. And then there's some question about to what extent to fund the core transportation improvements or requirements.
And I think the only other then question is, do we want to set some aside? Do we, are we willing to, not trying to, or do we want to have some left over?
Yeah, my only thought on that is certainly not $1 million. Like if you do the math on, half the affordable housing, depending on the bus stuff, and you add the equipment, right? We're holding 300 or so thousand, depending on how you do the number. And I mean, whether we just hold it a month or two, just to get us to brainstorm out ideas after today, say like, oh, we didn't think about this one that doesn't have that. That'd be my only thoughts on that. I certainly wouldn't want to hold it till 2026. That would be an injustice to what the money's used for.
Well, and I'm afraid we're just losing spending power with the money every day that passes. Asphalt gets more expensive, labor gets more expensive. So I'm, thinking about that as a reason to spend sooner rather than later. But I completely understand. I agree that, a couple, $250,000 left over, 300,000 is, entirely reasonable to me. So Tyler, what do you think?
What do you want us to bring back? I mean, we've got all your comments organized. If we could bring back next month a couple of, 2 or 3 options, like defined options.
It sounds like what I'm hearing is fully fund the maintenance request from the city for 320. Sounds like there's consensus on 15 shelters.
Or was it 14? 14 or 15 are shovel ready? 15, great, yeah.
So maybe some further conversation about to what extent to fund. I mean, I know it sounds like it's hard because it sounds like it's delaying a project that would benefit a tremendous number of individuals. But I'm not sure that we reached, I feel like we need a little more time to talk about that one. And then, so, maybe can we take action on those 2 and then leave the rest in reserve and continue talking about this over the next couple of weeks? At the next meeting, for example.
Take action on those 2 at the next meeting. Is that what you mean? That's exactly what I was going to say, Ari, is how about exactly what you said? Tyler is going, at the next meeting, we'll have just, do that math for us. The city of Bend's request and 15 bus stops. And then in the next meeting, we can discuss if or how much it sounds like it's just a how much question. It's not an if question. So I'm hearing great support for the core project, but that's where I see we do need a little more time. And so does that sound right to you? We'll have that number and then we'll discuss amount for core. Or, if you want to just say right now, yes, we're approving the city of Bend and 15 bus shelters. That's an option. You want to make a motion?
The city of Bend's request for maintenance equipment, $320,000, and a motion to approve funding for 15 bus shelters as proposed by Cascades East Transit. And then we're done with those 2. So
Do you want to assign a dollar number to that, or?
So $320,000 for the city of Bend's proposal for maintenance equipment for biking and walking facilities, and $300,000 for Cascades East Transit to fund bus shelters.
Second.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Raise your hands. Great. That is unanimous. That passed. Let us go, improving people's lives. Thank you so much, Councilor Mendez. That's great. At the next meeting, we will discuss further the core project and how much we think is appropriate for that. And if that we will leave the rest in reserve. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Great.
Cameron has her hand up.
Cameron,
Congratulations on making a decision. I need to know who seconded Ariel's motion.
of course, that was Commissioner Chang.
Thank you, sirs.
Thank you. All right, that moves us on to agenda item number 7, other business. Our next policy board member meeting is scheduled for April 21st at noon. We're not sure of the location. Please check your emails for that. It sounds like we have a very good idea of exactly what we'll be doing at that next meeting. And is anyone else got any? Yes, please.
Yeah, just for Tyler, the ODOT room is available on Fridays at this time. If that's
Okay.
if you just want to set it, or I can reserve it, and then if you find a better location.
Sure, you could, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you. The other topic for the next meeting is we might start discussing the next bit of funding, which is tied to carbon reduction. We have one more opportunity for public comments, last chance. Seeing, yes, sir.
If this is good of an order, I just want to say tomorrow is National Transit Driver Appreciation Day. So
Great, thank you, Eric.
be thankful for all of it.
All right. With that, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you so much, everybody. It was a great meeting. So proud of us. Good job, Ari. Move
Cameron,
us along. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. We will see you soon. All right, so do I have to start a GoFundMe page for the Bill Smith Memorial Bridge?
I think they.
Right.
I just stopped for it. Cameron, do you have a question?
I'm not gonna make any comments on it.
No.
Did I hear my
Or do I
name?
want to make a lot of comments on the record so people will go to my GoFundMe page?
Which doesn't exist. Cameron, did you have a question?
Oh, no, I forgot to lower my hand.
All right,
Sorry.
I'm gonna sign us out then.
Did you get chips? Chips?
Chips, you guys.
Wow. Oh, it's just a cookie.
Favorites.
Your chip. I heard cookie or apple.
Yeah, they don't have apples, I'm sorry.
Oh.
That's the menu, it's not updated.
I don't want.
Hey, free lunch. We make $600 a month plus free lunch every once in a while.
Tyler,
Yeah,
so is there $880,000 left unassigned?
what's that?
Oh, well.
Is there $880,000 left?
That sounds right, yes.
Because you were at 1.5 million?
Oh, the cookie bears.
Yeah. Yeah, we're like slightly over. Our number is like 1.5. And some change, I guess, it's and I can't remember the number.
And how much was the core sidewalk and street improvements?
800 core. Well, the city's got 320.
820?
Yeah, for the three options that you have,
I wanted to.
and then 300K. And I'm gonna talk to CET staff, make sure that's all that number. Yeah. Yes, we probably have over 800, we still want to take staff available.
Building, right?
Okay, thank
I believe that we should get better. No, that we would get more proactive.
Let's look at show.
Kind of attitudes from the commissioners. If all of the cities are asking for the same thing, consult,